Welcome to another episode, everyone. Big Devil from Rollin 60's Crip is an infamous individual. Well, he pumped fear in the greater Los Angeles area, scaring individuals and different gangs. He caught 2 bodies and became reputable in the area. And then, all of a sudden, he became a cop and went to prison, and things did not end well. Check this out.
We cut from a different cloth. Get up close and personal and do your business.
Welcome to Boys in the Hood TV.
Shout out to Boys in the Hood TV.
Today we're going to be discussing the life of Big Devil from the Rollin 60's. Now, Big Devil was born Pierre Romain in 1964 in Los Angeles. He and his brothers, Dre and Reggie, will be raised by a single mother after their father left them at the age of 5. Now, as a kid, Pierre would attend St. Celia Catholic School. Now, later in 1976, at the age of 12, Pierre's mother would move them to 59th Place, located in the Rollin 60 Crip neighborhood, specifically the area which would soon be known as the Gutter Ave. Now, his mother would not allow him or his brothers to attend any public schools, but only private schools. And by 1978, Pierre would attend Holy Cross Middle School for his 7th and 8th grade year. Now, living in the Rollin 60's neighborhood, Pierre would become friends with a lot of teens who were either affiliated or actual members of the 60's. Now, he and his brothers, because they were wearing uniforms, they would get picked on every single day and sometimes robbed and even jumped by rival gangs while walking home from school. Now, around 1979, Pierre would start attending Bourbon Day High School in Watts, which was an all-boys Catholic school. Now, he would be bused all the way there and back every single day. But later in that year, the war between the Rollin 60's and the A-Tray Gangster Crips would break out. Now, although he was going to school in Watts, far away from the war, every day after school, he would be on the block every chance that he got to kick it with his friends whenever his mother was at work. Now, eventually, Pierre would graduate high school, and he would choose to enlist into the Air Force. Now, while in the Air Force, he would become a military police officer and said to be a distinguished marksman. But only after 4 years, he would be honorably discharged in 1986. Now, Pierre would come home in the midst of the 80s gang violence, which was on a surge in South Central. But instead of falling victim to the gang violence, he would decide to put his military skills to use and get a job working at a local car wash as a security guard. But during his downtime, he would kick it in the set with the homies from the 60's every chance that he got. Now, doing his small security job at the car wash, he wasn't making a lot of money. So Pierre decided to apply for a job at the LAPD to become a police officer due to his background being an officer in the Air Force. Now, at the time, Pierre was hanging out with a lot of people from the streets.
Yeah, a lot of these police officers are crooked just like that. Some of them come from the street one way or another. The YT officers come from a racist background in the street, the KKK or what have you. Some of the black officers come from the street in the LAPD. This is why they have been known to plant drugs on people, you name it, set people up, kill people, the whole nine, because they are corrupt, they are a gang, and they come from the army, the military, the street, and then they go into the police force. This individual here, who ends up being an infamous individual from Rollin 60's, is trying to become a police after being a marksman in the military.
Be from the 60's or known dope dealers in the area. Now, in the summer of 1987, Pierre and his homie Watts will be out celebrating the Los Angeles Lakers winning the 1987 NBA championship. Now, Pierre had his Corvette, and his homie Watts was driving his 300 Nissan. Now, Watts would end up losing control of his car and accidentally swerving into Pierre's Corvette, totaling it. Now, with Pierre's car totaled, he would start driving around in his sister-in-law's white Mustang. Now, only weeks later, Pierre would make a decision that would change the course of his life forever. On June 29th, at around 2 a.m., Pierre, along with his homeboy, named DeJuan Dixon, who was a known member of the Rollin 60's, will be driving down Highland Avenue in Pierre's sister-in-law white Mustang. Now, as they passed a popular local nightclub, across the street was a 21-year-old aspiring DJ by the name of Jay Clark, along with his friend named Philip, who was also a known DJ. Now, J.A. Clark had just got a custom 1984 Nissan 300ZX, which was gifted to him by his uncle. But this night, both Clark and Philip wanted to go out and celebrate and kick it with some females. So they decided to wait across the street in the parking lot for the girls to show up before deciding to go inside. Pierre and Dixon would spot that Nissan, which looked exactly like his homie Watts, who had just crashed his only weeks prior. Both men would then make their way towards the Nissan. And that's when Pierre would yank open the driver's door, aiming a loaded revolver at J.A. Clark. He would immediately start demanding that Clark get out of the car. And Clark would slowly start reaching for his handgun, which was under his seat. While in the process of doing this, that's when Pierre would start trying to pull Clark out of the car with his free hand. But Dixon would then run over to the passenger side and pull out Philip, but Philip would be able to get away and start running. He would then hide in a near alleyway. And out of nowhere, suddenly, multiple shots could be heard. Both Pierre and Clark would exchange gunfire at a close distance. Nearly 6 shots would be let off. J.A. Clark would be found hit multiple times as his body lay slumped over the center console. Both Pierre and Dixon would take off running, heading back down to Citrus Street, hopping back into the Mustang and fleeing the scene. Now, Philip and other witnesses nearby would immediately run back to Clark, who they would find inside the car convulsing. Someone nearby would call 911, and police and EMTs would arrive shortly on scene, and they would rush Clark immediately to the hospital. But only 1 hour later, J.A. Clark would be pronounced dead from his injuries. Now, the autopsy report would show that Clark had been shot 4 times, once in his hip, thigh, lateral part of his chest, and 1 straight shot was tore through his heart, which was the fatal shot. Now, it will also show that he had been hit with either a .357 or a .38. Now, detectives would arrive on scene to recover Clark's gun.
Well, that's a big difference, a .357 and a .38. But man, the death in the community is just too much.
And 1 expended bullet, which was near the rear tire of the car. Now, forensics would find fingerprints on the passenger side window of the car. As the police continued to canvass the area, multiple witnesses would come forward to speak with the officers at the scene. 1 witness would tell officers that he saw 2 men, 1 armed with a gun, wearing a blue jacket, running down Citrus Avenue while fleeing in a white Mustang. Now, this would lead officers to going to Citrus Avenue and discovering tire marks on the street. Now, during this investigation, forensic testing would show that the bullet shot from Clark's gun had blue fibers of clothing attached to it, also with specks of blood. Now, 2 weeks later, fingerprints results would come back in, matching Dwayne Dixon. They would immediately go out and detain and question Dixon. Now, during questioning, Dixon would tell officers that he was at the club that night and he heard the shooting and he came outside and he may have or may not possibly have touched the car after examining what took place. But due to lack of evidence, they would release Dixon. Now, only a few weeks later, police would meet with an informant who would tell them that 2 men affiliated with the Rollin 60 Crips, Pierre Romain and DeJuan Dixon, who would be identified as both of the men involved in the murder of J.A. Clark. Now, the informant would also notify the police that Pierre had been shot at the time of the attempted carjacking. And on July 28th, both Pierre and Dixon would be arrested in connection with the murder of J.A. Clark. Now, that's
snitching has been going on for a long time. It's just more prevalent now, and apparently more acceptable even these days. Certainly more acceptable now than it was back in the days. But bear in mind, this happened in 1987, and there's an informant exposing everything that happened in this situation. But I mean, these individuals are leaving fingerprints, shooting people in the heart, and then running off. Yeah, you're asking for trouble. But it gets worse with this guy.
Same day that Pierre was arrested, the police would execute a search warrant on his mother's home where he stayed at, and they would recover an empty gun holster along with multiple receipts from the Beverly Hills Gun Club. They would also recover a picture of Pierre posing in front of a white Mustang, which matched the description of the Mustang at the scene of the murder. Now, police...
They've been using social media to solve cases for decades. They've been putting cases together. You posting pictures, and they've been solving cases just like that. This dude is a part of the Beverly Hills Guns Club. Are you serious? Are you for real? The Beverly Hills Gun Club? What the hell is wrong with you?
Would impound this Mustang, and they would determine that the tires from this Mustang did match the same tire marks that were found at the crime scene on Citrus Avenue. Now, while in custody, police would discover what looked like a gunshot wound on Pierre's right arm. Now, a doctor would determine that it looked like a through-and-through gunshot wound. But Pierre would tell officers during questioning that he had sustained an injury from the car accident 2 weeks ago while celebrating the Lakers championship. But ultimately, both Pierre and Dixon would officially be charged with the murder. Now, while in custody, Pierre would officially get put on to the Rollin 60's and start going by Devil. Now, in October, during a preliminary hearing, it was discovered that the eyewitness Phillips, who was in the car the night that Clark was murdered, would be deemed unfit to testify. It would come to light that Phillips had admitted to seeing a hypnosis to help him remember the exact details the night of the shooting. And now with Philip taking off the case as an eyewitness, the case would then officially fall apart. And by December, both Pierre and Dixon would both be released and the case against them would be officially dropped. Now from this point on, Pierre, aka Devil, will be fully immersed into the gang.
Bear in mind that just roughly half of homicides in the country are solved. Half of the homicides in the country on average go unsolved. It was about 43% that go unsolved. I think that number has since increased. So nearly half go unsolved, meaning that they will arrest you for a murder. It'll be a DA reject. They will arrest you for it, keep you in there for a few months as they so-called investigate, and then they'll let you go. Because you are arrested for a murder does not mean that you're going to prison for the rest of your life. Murder is really the hardest thing to prove. So a lot of times individuals are arrested for it and then let go.
Life. He would become extremely active out in the streets. And in 1991, he would be arrested yet again, but this time for being in possession of a firearm. His name would now be profiled by the gang unit, and he would be officially listed as an active gang member of the Rollin 60's. Now, the streets of LA in the early 90s was a war zone, and the 60's was one of the largest black gangs in the city, and they were in a lot of beef at the time. And Big Devil will become a known factor throughout the 60's. And in the summer of 1993, he will be arrested yet again for another murder. This time, they will have an eyewitness who would identify Devil as a shooter. But by September, during the preliminary hearing, the key witness would change his story completely, retracted his statement. Now, the DA believed that Devil had sent people to intimidate this witness, which led to the retraction of the statement. And eventually, this case will be dropped and Devil will walk away a free man. But by 1995, he still had that itch to have a career in law enforcement.
He got 9 lives. I mean, you're getting away with a lot if you're guilty of it. Either way, this is a second homicide you've been arrested for, put in jail for, and then found your way to freedom within days and weeks and months, not 30 and 40 years. At some point, we have to get it and say, okay, that's enough, I'm done.
So the first thing that he would do, he would start petitioning for a declaration of innocence on all of his cases, which he had either beaten or had been dismissed. Now, all charges would eventually end up being removed with the exception of the J. Clark murder because the detective on the case at the time had petitioned against it. And by 1998, he would become a sworn officer for the LA Air Force Base, in which he would excel in. Now, although he did have 2 murder charges and other charges on his rap sheet, the LA Air Force only did a minimum background check, and Devil had admitted to them of the murder charge, which he had dismissed. But most importantly, his employer saw his stellar record and background as a contracted security officer years prior. Now, in 2003, Devil would decide to apply to be a San Francisco police officer, which had a higher pay. But things would start going bad once they ran a background check on him and red flags would pop up. Now, the original detective on the case, Rick Jackson, would immediately be notified, and this would lead to him having the Clark case reopened, and he would get a warrant from a judge to get a DNA sample from Devil. Now, by the 2000s,
yeah, man, what are you doing? You done got away with it. They thought you did it. They had, a modicum of evidence, at least against you, fingerprints, what your crime mean, there at that first crime scene, and stuff like that. Excuse me. But the witness changed his story on the stand, so you end up walking and beat the case. They rejected the case, but the case is always open. A murder that has no statute of limitation. So, of course, they come get you 30 years later, 20 years later. We've seen people get arrested 60 years later for something that happened during the civil rights movement. Oh, 90-year-old man come walking in the courtroom with a cane or in a wheelchair. His life is over. But they'll still prosecute you many years later, decades later, for a homicide. Why would you go and try to be a San Francisco police officer? They are indeed going to do a background check. And then they look at that and they say, well, hold on. He beat the case because this person didn't show up or whatever. Or didn't beat the case. He wasn't found innocent. He never went to trial, which means you can still go. So he wants to be a police officer. Let's make sure he didn't actually kill somebody. Even though they won't killers on the team. He just didn't expose himself.
DNA forensics advancements had the ability to do things that were not possible in the 1980s, which was officially matching the blood or saliva samples to potential suspects. But not only did Rick Jackson get a DNA warrant, but he will also get a warrant for wiretaps on Devil's phone. Now, after the police collected DNA samples from Big Devil, he would immediately make a phone call to another member of the Rollin 60's, discussing about what just took place.
They try to get a nigga saliva and shit to try to compare it to the, slab left on the bullet and shit. It's going to be the same results from 17 years ago.
Now, only weeks later, the results of the test will come back in. DNA found on the bullet at the scene of the crime would match the Big Devil, and he would officially be arrested and charged with murder. Now, Big Devil will be given a bond of $1 million, but his attorneys would be able to have this bond lowered to only $500K. Now, the DA would try to fight it, but unfortunately, they were not successful. Now, while out, the DA would offer Devil multiple plea deals, only 6 years for manslaughter. But Big Devil was very confident that he would get no jail time. So over the next several years, he would use different legal tactics to stall out his trial date. But eventually, by 2017...
No, damn those legal tactics that stall out your trial. I mean, that's what people do. You bail out, you extend the court dates for as long as you possibly can because you're trying to stay free, enjoy your freedom, particularly if you think you may be found guilty, you may go to jail. You done just caught this case, but you done bailed out, you're out on the street. I've done that before. And so you put the case off. The judge says, be back in court August 21st. And then your lawyer says, Your Honor, can we come back in December? My client has to do this and that. You're just stretching it as far as you can. But they're offering you 6 years because the case is old. They probably thinking themselves, it's been 17 years. He was arrested. He was let go. Whatever, man. Just another black dude that y'all killed. We'll give you 6 years. You was in the military. You was a cop. We'll give you 6 years. He says no to 6 years for murder. What do you mean? You think that you're going to beat the case? They got fingerprints of your crime there. They got a picture of you standing next to the white Mustang. Got the tire tracks from the Mustang that was there. Your saliva came back that it was you. What are you talking about?
The trial date will be set. Now, during his trial, multiple witnesses would come forward, including eyewitnesses from 1987 and even friends of Devil. Now, one friend of Devil's in particular, a man by the name of Glenn Tucker, would testify that Devil had given him multiple guns to hold, which included 2 revolvers and rifles. But he would later admit that he gave them back to Devil after his mother did not want those guns at her home. Now, Devil's brother, Andre, his wife named Pamela, would also testify. Now, she would be called as a hostile witness because she had originally told the police that her late husband, Andre, had stated that Devil had been shot and that they needed her to come meet them. But later on, she would later retract those same statements. Now, the defense will argue that the DNA found was that of Devil's brother, Andre. Now, it will be later told to the court that his brother Andre had died in jail in 2011. Now, the defense would do something that is always risky, and that would be to put Big Devil on the stand. Now, Big Devil would deny being a member.
Damn, so they tried to put it on his brother? They tried to put the homicide on his brother, said that's my brother's DNA. Said his brother had died though in jail in 2011. So that don't really, that wasn't at this time. Perhaps his brother was still alive and they tried to say it was his brother's DNA. I don't know, man. God.
The Rollin 60's at the time of the shooting and denied being anywhere near the club because he was at home waiting to receive a phone call about his application to becoming a police officer for the LAPD. Now, he would admit to later joining the Rollin 60's after spending his time in the county back in 1987. Now, he would also claim that the alleged gunshot on his arm was in fact not a gunshot, but was from his brother Andre, who stabbed him at a birthday party in 1987 after they got into a physical altercation. Now, the prosecution would argue that Devil was in fact a member of the Rollin 60's.
This dude is trying to get his brother on death row. It's his DNA at this murder scene, and now you're saying that your brother stabbed you. Jeez. I am my brother's keeper. Anybody?
Crips at the time of the murder, and that they had targeted Clark because of his Nissan had looked exactly like his friend's Watt's Nissan, which he had crashed the night of the Lakers NBA championship celebration only weeks prior to the murder. But also they would make it clear that Clark was wearing a red shirt in reference to a possible gang motive also. Now, Phillips, who was originally disqualified as a witness originally in 1987, would now be reinstated by a judge at the request of the prosecution. Now, although Phillips never saw anyone face that night, he would state that they were in fact being carjacked by two people the night Clark was murdered. Now, the prosecution used Phillips just in case the defense tried to go the self-defense route. Now, ultimately, in the end, Pierre Romain, aka Big Devil, would be found guilty of first-degree murder of J. Clark.
In court today, Romain's defense attorney unsuccessfully argued the trial was unfair.
DNA on a projectile that could have come from Andre if Andre was wearing Pierre's clothes.
And sentenced Romain to 27 years in prison.
25 years to life for first-degree murder. An additional 2 years for personal use of a firearm, which the jury found to be true.
I would like to thank everybody for tapping in, and I will.
Wow. Okay. There you have it. Shout out to Boys in the Hood TV. Big Devil. 25 years. You got 27 years to life because the judge said 25 years of life and then an additional 2 years for whatever. As we know, he was offered 6 years, in which he would probably do 2 years. These days, even those days, you either did a couple of years. Now you're there for the rest of your life, unless you can come back on appeal or what have you. I know many individuals like this that was offered 5 years, 4 years, didn't take the deal and ended up getting life or 40 years or whatever, took it to trial for whatever reason, feeling like they would be able to beat it in trial. Just some of us feel invincible or that they don't have enough evidence, whatever, but it seemed that they had some sort of evidence. Whenever you're talking about DNA, I'm done. I'm taking the deal. It's hard to overcome DNA, saliva, fingerprints, this and that. No, even though fingerprints is not an absolute science, actually. But still, they act like it is in court. Okay, there you have it. Big Devil, Rollin 60's. Been through a lot. He caught these different murder cases, was able to beat them at first. He got out, became a police, and then tried to be a San Francisco police. They did some. That's what happened. When he tried to become a San Francisco police, they said, hold on, who is this dude? Then they said, you got a murder charge. And he said, oh yeah, I beat the murder. I was back in the days, whatever, like he did with the other people that hired him. But they said, no, let's check this out. You took the case to the police. And they started investigating and said, no, this dude is guilty of this. Oh my God. And then you end up with life in prison. What the hell? What are you trying to be a police for? You in the street, catching murders. Damn. He cooked now. You never know, but certainly should have took the 6 years, I would think. Maybe he wasn't guilty and felt like, I'm not guilty, so I'm not taking anything. I'm not guilty. I don't know. But if you were guilty, and they clearly, ultimately found you guilty, you probably should have took that 6 years. Don't risk your life. Hell, sometimes even if you're not guilty, you might want to take it because they'll still find you guilty for something you didn't do. Nasty work. Let me know what you think in the comments. Stay safe and stay free. People.